companies have been adopting Agile practices for over a decade now, and even before then in various precursor forms of Agile, extreme and programming and so on. One of the challenges we observe, and we bring those challenges in these webinar series, is with the real adoption of Agile in a pragmatic way in organizations, and what gets worded as being Agile rather than doing Agile. And many times in different companies, there is a spotty Agile adoption. And what we have today is actually a deeper look at how to think about Agile adoption and how to practice it at different levels as you find yourself in your respective organizations. And I'm delighted to have a real experienced speaker on this topic, Don McGreal. So let me introduce Don. In fact, let me give a minute before I introduce him, go through the logistics of the webinar today. So as usual, we'll have roughly 45 to 50 minutes of prepared presentation. And then after that, we'll take questions at the end. But we may even take questions along the way if the questions make sense as part of the content that is being covered at that slide or that page. So feel free to keep sending in your questions, and then we'll still reserve 10-15 minutes at the end to take all the remaining questions. We will make the PowerPoint available by later today or tomorrow once the webinar is over, so you will have access to it, and hopefully a decent recorded version. We haven't had consistent luck in recording good quality version, but we will try it again this time. With that, let me introduce the presenter, Don McGreal. Don is the VP of Learning Solutions at Improving Enterprises. He's a regular featured presenter in these webinar series. In his role as VP of Learning Solutions at Improving Enterprises, he is a hands-on Agile consultant and instructor. So as a consultant, he really gets to play multiple roles as a developer or a business analyst or Agile coach. So his real practical experience following Agile practices. And as an instructor, he has had a lot of experience teaching classes with a large number of software professionals around topics related to Scrum, acceptance testing, object-oriented design, test-driven development, various other related topics. And he's a passionate practitioner of Agile practices and has published articles both in Scrum Alliance and the Agile Journal. And he's also co-founder of TastyCupcakes.org, which is a comprehensive collection of games and exercises for accelerating the adoption of Agile principles. So I'm delighted to have Don cover the topic of Agile adoption with us today. With that, over to you, Don.
Thanks, Hemant. Good to be back. And hi, everyone. Like Hemant said, I'm going to be going through basically 4 different levels of Agile adoption. And if you have questions, just enter them in there, and we may pause along the way, or we can do them at the end. So just a little bit about me. Hemant already kind of mentioned that I work for Improving Enterprises, based here in Dallas, where I am right now. At tastycupcakes.org. You can check that website out. It's a community website for all kinds of different activities you can try with your team or within your classes if you teach for learning Agile principles and values. I'm with scrum.org as well. We're a partner of theirs, and I do their professional Scrum Master certification training. So I do that all over the U.S. And I'm a Canadian, which is also a important thing to know along the way. This is my family. It's my wife and our 2 dogs. That was last year, and then just this year, or I guess it's last year now, this little girl showed up February 29th last year, so she's a leapling. And so she's just coming up on her first birthday. So it reminds me I should update these pictures. She looks a little bit different. So that's Megan. Now, this is what we're going to be talking about. This is your company's hierarchy. You can probably make this sort of traditional hierarchical structure work with no matter where you are in your organization. And the idea is that you've got, kind of this generic tree structure. You've got a head, a CIO, or it could be, any level. You may have a compliance wing, and you've got technology side. You've got a business or marketing or some other side as well. So it's basically those that want product and then those that deliver product on the other side. In fact, you could take this out of IT, out of software development, and it would probably still make sense. We're going to be using this as a basis for the 4 levels that we're going to be talking about today for the Agile adoption. The first is individual adoption. So the idea here is that you're one person on a team. What do you do? What do you do if you believe in Agile? You've been there before. You are very Agile, but nobody else around you is. What are some steps you can take? Then number two is we'll talk about step up from there is your whole team is, but you don't have support from the business. Product on the business side are used to throwing things over the wall at you and hoping to see a product within 6 months to a year. And thirdly, maybe you do have business buy-in, but the organization doesn't support it. The organization are still stuck in old ways and not supporting your Agile adoption. And then finally, we're going to talk about enterprise adoption from top down. What if you are empowered to make some changes, but it's a big undertaking? What are some things you need to take into account? So the idea here is that within these 4 levels, you've got you can find yourself, you're probably closer to just one of those 4. So my assertion is that these are the 4 things, the 4 possible situations you can find yourself in when adopting Agile. There may be others, but this is what I've seen. So let's get started. First one is we call it the all by myself one. This is you are a new member of a team, regardless of what your role is, developer, QA, BA, manager, and you're within a large organization. You've been on a successful Agile project before, but you're the only one on your new team with any Agile experience. When it comes to adopting Agile, your non-Agile teammates range from eager to cautious to skeptical. So they're all over the place with this. And the question is, what do you do? What do you do in this situation? So some of you may be thinking, that's me right now. This is my situation. And so let's kind of break this down. So for each of these, we're going to have a bit of a breakdown, bit of a flowchart, activity diagram actually here on what you can do. What are some situations that you can put in place? So when you start, the very first question you should be asking, is there any interest on a team? Is this something that others have heard about that they're willing to try? This is a situation I find myself in, or I used to find myself in a lot more when Agile wasn't as popular, when there wasn't that kind of buy-in from the management level. So you look around you, look at people within the team, and are they looking at doing something new? If yes, the next best thing to do is to schedule some sort of Agile introduction, and it could be from you, but it could be from others. You can bring somebody in. It could just be a Q&A session. It could just be, let's figure out what this thing is. But the goal is going to be, should we give this a shot or not? And that's the idea behind this whole thing. Now, if it's not, if there is no interest at all in the team, then I sort of half-jokingly put this in there, is just go find another team. Half-jokingly. I've always said that the one thing that stops me as an Agile coach and as someone that's worked with organizations at all kinds of different levels for transitioning to Agile, the one thing that'll always stop it from being a success is if there is no motivation. That people are happy with the status quo. They feel things are just fine, because no single individual is ever going to be able to totally change an organization or even your team. You need that critical mass. So that doesn't mean they all have to be gun-ho. That means, are they willing to try? Are they open to new ideas? They don't have to. Skeptical is good and healthy, but are they motivated by negative feelings on this? They don't think that we should change for whatever reason, whether it's political or they just don't see the pain points the same way everybody else does. We don't do Agile just because. We do it because there's got to be a reason. And we don't do it because it's the latest fad and people are talking about it. There's got to be a reason. Now, if there isn't, if nobody really wants to do it, you're going to be in trouble. So if it's yes, though, schedule an Agile intro and Q&A. But one of the mistakes we tend to make with this is we make it too much about the IT side of things, the development side of things. So and those of us that have been doing Agile for a while, I'm sure you realize that key to its success is showing the business value. Is there interest from the business standpoint? Is there something? What are their pain points? Can we sell it to them? Would they be interested in coming to this? Because if so, invite them and then do this Agile intro Q&A session. And we do these things for organizations all the time. We have these 60 to 90-minute sessions. We call them lunch and learns. And where we'll go into organizations, we typically do them free, but we'll just do an intro to Agile, what to expect from it, from a business side, from We're not going to give you all the details from it in that short amount of time, but what could it bring? Are these some of the pain points that you're suffering from, and what could you get from it? So, but even if there isn't business interest, you can still make it work. It shouldn't stop you, and you shouldn't just throw the baby out with the bathwater and say, well, Agile's not going to work here, so let's not worry about it. Do it anyways. Go with the Agile intro, and then you look at the second scenario too, without business support. How do we move forward without business support? There is a lot that you can get from an Agile environment, even without business support, but business support to be truly successful as an organization is key. So Agile intro and QA, the very next thing you need to do is decide, is this worth doing? Go, no-go decision. Now that we've talked about it, are you guys interested at all? Because even if I can get a maybe from that, just like some idea of like, well, let's try this, then let's go do a sprint. The beautiful thing about a lot of these Agile endeavors, certainly Scrum, I mean, because it's iterative, we can just try something. Let's try it. We're not going to go in the wrong direction for 30 days. We are going to actually try to get something done. And we're not going to waste a lot of time planning. We're going to build something. So worst case scenario, you do it, you try to build something, but it's not work you probably wouldn't have done otherwise. So that's a key message as well. So even if it's maybe, let's just try it. Let's do it. Let's put something together. And then do a retrospective at the end, and let's discuss it. Let's spend a little bit more time on the process itself and on another go, no-go decision. Now that we've done a sprint, is this good? Was this better than before? What can we do better? Do you want to try it again? If it's another maybe, let's do another sprint. And in the early days of Agile adoption and Scrum, this is very much what I would do. We used to call this covert Scrum or covert Agile, where we would do it within our team, we would make it work, we would just try it one sprint at a time, and go from there. Not ideal because you don't have the whole business input, so our performance wasn't where it could have been, but it did bring us a lot of autonomy in how we got this stuff done and a lot of benefits. If it's a resounding yes, though, if after this there's a lot of excitement, then I can't stress this enough, and not just because I am an Agile trainer and coach, but the training and coaching piece of this really does help. If you have the budget, if you have the ability to get this done, it doesn't have to be some external person. If you have resources internally for training, you leverage them, use them. What about people that have done this successfully before? Can you get them to help out a little bit for a sprint? This is a huge thing. Change is very, very difficult. Culturally, that's the tough part of adopting Agile. It doesn't happen overnight. But by having a coach there, they're the ones that can help you through these things, kind of point out little things to try. It's sort of like this other set of eyes that can watch it from the outside in. Really does help. And that goes for a lot of things, athletics or whatever. That's what coaching is there for. But then do a sprint and then retrospective. So you continue this until you get to this point where even if it's late, even if you've been doing it for several sprints, this type of training can really help. If the decision is no, if they're saying, look, we did this, it's not for us, and there's all these other political things and the people, it's really about the people. The people don't believe or don't want to change. Not that they don't believe they can change. I can work with that. When they truly do not want to change, that's something that's hard to work with. And I've been down this road too many times, and without that critical mass, it's just not going to work. And that's why I go off to the find another team piece. Also, though, if it is yes, as a Agile coach or Scrum Master, one of the best things you can do, if your team is doing it, the best things you can do for Agile adoption is if things are working for you, advertise it. Put it out there. Invite other teams to your sprint reviews, your demos. Bring them in, and then see if there's any interest on those other teams. Because the more teams around you that are working this way, the easier it's going to be for you and your Agile adoption. So embodying Agile to the rest of the organization should be part of your goal as well. So ask the question of other teams. If there's interest with these other teams, go through the same process again. Have people from your team come in and do the Q&A with them. Another thing we see a lot of is once we get some success, we put up some boards, we have tasks on the wall. Other teams see it. They just see what we're doing, what the activities that we're doing. We're standing up for 15 minutes every day, and they just start copying it, but don't truly understand the goal. This tells me, and we've seen this several times, this tells me that there's a need. They want to change. They want to do something different because they know what they're doing is not right. So they feel that by just copying the mechanics, they can get there. But the reality is, it takes more than that. It's more of a culture. It's a set of values and principles. It's a philosophy. So having the ability to introduce this to them separately, properly, is key. So maybe you could be involved in the training and coaching for these other teams as well. That's the all by myself scenario. So just basically to recap, one person, but make sure that this is set it as a goal, something to do. There are certainly some activities technically that you can be doing that is, I guess, sort of under the Agile umbrella, but until your whole team has it as a goal to get better and better every day, every sprint with their process, then you're not really there from an Agile perspective. It always has to be about this continuous improvement framework that you're trying to set up.
Can we take a question before you move to the next
scenario? Absolutely.
So the question here is, are there any stories you can share of about unbelievers, that is, people who are not bought into the idea of Agile? Did they eventually buy in, get convinced, or do they gently get pushed out of the organization? How does it play out?
Yeah, I did. So I'll take this and I'll tell you about a specific instance, but even before that, in any successful Agile adoption I've seen, as we go through, there is always a few that you're going to lose. You have to prepare for that. There are always a few that just are not buying into this, and the transparency that this brings to it is just not comfortable for the organization or for people or for whatever. And any successful adoption has come with losing a few people, and but that's not necessarily a bad thing. Now, one specific story is I was working with a fairly large retailer and their e-com division, and this is one where we were working with 3 different teams, and everything was working fairly well, and they invited me to come talk to a whole other department. It was like a warehousing department. So their release cycle wasn't as much as e-com, and they had all kinds of issues. So I was talking with them, and I was showing them it, and they got pretty excited. I did the Agile intro and QA, so the team really liked it. So the next day we were building the wall. We were doing a daily scrum around this wall when a VP walked by. And he said, "What is this? What are you guys doing here?" And he kind of, they all sort of said, "Well, we're trying this Scrum thing." And he's like, whose idea was this? And he looked at me. He didn't recognize me. He says, "You, what are you doing here?" And I kind of told him that they invited me over to talk to them about it. And he says, "Well, we're a few weeks, or I think it was like 2 months, 3 months from a huge deadline. We've never missed one in 18 years. If we miss this, then you and your organization is never going to be back in this place again." I'd never met this guy before, but he kind of called me out. So he brought us into the office, me and some of the other managers, some of his managers that reported to him, that kind of asked me to come in. And he was going down this path of, we can't risk doing this late in the stage. And my reaction to that had to be, well, then let's not do it. Agile cannot be the scapegoat. The Agile coach cannot be the scapegoat. Scrum cannot be the scapegoat. Scrum isn't there to solve your problems. Scrum's there to expose them. You guys have to solve the problems. And if you think everything is fine, then why would you ever, I agree with you, we should not be doing this. And I was trying to set it up so that the other people there the people that invited me in could then tell this VP what they had told me earlier, and they eventually did, because they were kind of put on the spot there. And they had to go down the list of reasons why this isn't working. This is different than last year, and here's why. Here's what's happening. Here we're at extreme risk of missing this, and we're going to miss it unless we try something new. We build this stuff out, and it had to come from his people to truly point out the needs. So what this was doing was just exposing that a little bit more. And he had to say the words, "Okay, I will accept. This is okay. If you guys believe it, then this will happen." But it can't be put on the coach. It can't be put on the people doing the adoption. We have to understand that it's up to the team, it's up to the people to actually solve the problems, but we'll expose it through this whole process. But if they don't want to do it, then I have to agree with them. We're not going to do this because it's going to fail. If you want it to fail, it will fail. And that's the main thing. I don't know if that answers the question.
No, this is excellent story. Yeah. So I appreciate that. One other question let's take on this page before you go to scenario 2. That if you are in your no part of the decision tree, which is there's not much interest in the team, is as a developer or even for that matter as any other individual contributor, project manager or QA, is there anything one can do and make progress towards Agile, some practices and so on, although you don't have rest of your organization or your team around you on that stage?
You can, there's always something you can do. I mean, if you're not willing to be the one to be the champion for Agile and nobody's really interested, does it mean that you just then don't bother? No. But as far as Agile adoption, though, is concerned, it probably, yes, it probably means there's not much that's going to change. You could make your life easier, though. There's certain practices that are kind of under that Agile umbrella that you can do. You could, pay attention to quality, build something workable as much as you can, communicate with the business as much as you can. You yourself can work in a very Agile way and hope that that kind of catches on. But if you're serious about Agile adoption, if your goal is for your team to be doing it, then you have to make it explicit. You have to set it as a goal for the team. Because what I've seen is that it drags you down the other way. I've been that lone person on a team, and I felt strongly about it, but I wasn't there to be to bring Agile to them. So I would do these things, but I found even where I would normally do like 80% test coverage, let's say, even then it was hard when you're in an environment where I'm the only one doing it, and it would lower it to about 20-30% test coverage because I constantly had this push from the other side. And I found without the critical mass, without the other people really helping me and motivating me to do these things, I tended not to. And I did a few, and I suggested things here and there. But when all is said and done, did I bring Agile to the team? No. And so there's certain things you can do to make your life a little bit easier, but you're not going to have nearer the success as if because ultimately Agile's a team game. You're not Agile unless you have a team working towards the same goals. So you can do a few Agile quote practices, but Agile adoption is probably far away.
Right. Great. Thank you.
Okay. So the second one is over the wall, and we call it this because a lot of teams are in this situation where you're on a team of 5 programmers, some testers, you have a manager. You've all been doing Agile, practicing Agile, being Agile, I should say, not doing Agile, in some form or fashion for years. So the business, though, is on the other side. They're unfamiliar with Agile, and they're used to doing things the old way, of just handing off the requirements. They work on something for 3 months, hand it to you, and then say, well, call us in a year. What do you do in that situation? So this one hits home to me as well, where quite a few projects were like this, where they put us in a situation where they hand us a requirements document, and it'll be sent to me before I even show up as a consultant for this organization, and I'll read every word of that requirements document, and then the next day we'll meet with the business, and they'll have a kickoff meeting, and the product sponsor will be there, and they'll say, you know what, this is great. This is a great time. You guys are going to do great. Here's all this information you need. I believe in you, and good luck. And away we go. And the one time in particular, this happened to me with another fairly large organization. This person, we saw him on the kickoff meeting, and then we didn't see this project sponsor. I'm using air quotes right now. This sponsor again for a year later until he showed up to the beta launch. So the whole project took a year, which was scheduled to take a year. It was a big thing, big retail application, and he never showed up once. We invited him to demos and everything, and he never showed up once. So what do you do in this situation? In a situation where they've given you some requirements that go stale within weeks or months, and now the software development side, the IT side, is making the decision on what to build next. So you're in this situation, you're not Agile because you're not doing what the business is seeing value in, and they're not measuring value either. So is there a business sponsor should be the first question you ask. If there is, so this is a situation where maybe there is somebody on the business side, but they just don't know. They don't know what the goal is. All they're doing is they're working the way things have always happened, where they do the document, they patent it off, and they move on to their next project. But if there is, if you ask the question, and there's somebody that truly does care about this thing, And I'm not saying can you be the product owner role or that kind of thing. It's more of are you a champion? Are you somebody I can go to every day for questions on this stuff? And can I plan the release with you as well? Can you bring them in and then show them? Do the sizing, bring it out, break it down however we need to, but show them the release plan. Ask them what they want to see first, because in this model, we're going to show you something immediately. We're going to do a sprint, and we're going to actually build something. What do you want to see first? Talk to them about the minimal viable product, the MVP. What is it that we can build that will get us a little bit, that'll actually, we could go to production with if we had to? What's the minimal set of features that we can have that can bring value to you? And to start thinking about that, which ultimately I find so many in the business side don't. They don't think about these things. They build the document, it's done when the whole document's done, and they're not always thinking about what we need to actually go to release. Another word for releasing is deliver value. So so that's great if you have somebody that's willing to play that role, but if you don't, what do you do? And this is the situation I found myself in with this absent stakeholder. So what you want to do here is, because you're doing a sprint and you're building something every single sprint, this is the single most important thing you can do, is just say whether they believe in Agile or not, just say, can I invite you to this demo of what we're doing in 2 weeks from now, 4 weeks from now, whatever. Can I get on your calendar now? I just want to show you what we're doing here. And invite your business and stakeholders to this demo. You can invite other teams as well. I like to do that. But basically all the stakeholders on the business side, and see who shows up. You can do mini demos if they don't show up too. Kind of bring it to them, walk them through it a little bit, and then do the demo, and then ask the question again: is there a business sponsor? I kind of call this my the pattern I call this is the "Are you my new daddy?" pattern. Because we don't have direction now. We don't have a lead on the business side, and we need one. So after we show what we're doing, we're slowly building trust, hopefully, with the team, with the business, and we ask, is there anyone here that's willing to stand up and be our champion? Is there anyone here willing to take this on and be a part of this? Because we need help. Right now we're making guesses. We've got a requirements document, but it's not all valid anymore, and we're deciding what to do every sprint. We'd like one of you on the business side to be the one making those decisions. Point us in the right direction, and we'll work towards that. So that's a key thing. And another interesting thing happens when you start to do this demo. We found out years later, after we pushed this thing to production, and it made $150 million a year. We kept asking this question, and about 5 months into it, 5 sprints into it, these are 4-week sprints, one of the BAs, a business analyst on the IT side, but knew the business very well, he was working on the corporate version of what we were building on the retail version. So he was very interested in a lot of the stuff we were doing. So he stood up and said, look, I can help, not full-time, but this is stuff I'm really interested in and passionate in, and I will be your sponsor here. I will help you out. I will do it. He wasn't necessarily empowered, but he knew the right people. He could get questions answered. He could make decisions. He was very well liked and respected in the organization too. So he was able to be that de facto product owner, not by title, but he was there for us and was able to make this happen. We would have fallen him off the cliff if that's where he took us. But the point was is that he knew the business more than we did. He made the decisions. We did what he did, and it turned out being success. And we looked back and we talked about the guy that afterwards, years later, after finding out how much money this thing made, we were wondering why that guy, that initial sponsor that brought us in, never showed up for one demo. And somebody pointed out that he knew why. It's because the moment he would have shown up to one demo, think about what would have happened then. Just by showing up to a demo, this person is now accountable. It would be irresponsible of him to show up every 4 weeks to this demo and then at the end complain about what happened, what they got from the business standpoint. So that's another thing to keep track of, is that don't dismiss these sprint reviews. They're extremely important. You do them, you show it to people. Everybody there who opens their eyes is accountable for the delivery of that product. So think about that next time around and invite people, show them what we're doing, because they have to be able to give feedback. It would be irresponsible of them not to. So that's the over-the-wall one, and I found I've been in this situation a few times of just constantly pushing for that. You need the business people on your side. Can you be agile without them? Sure, but it's going to increase your agility so much more, not just from a team perspective, from an organizational perspective. You can reduce the cycle time for when somebody, a stakeholder on the business, asks for something and when you deliver it, when they're involved every single day. So true agility involves the business.
Don, let's take a question on this one before we move to the next scenario. So in this situation, when you got the requirements, when you get a requirements document from the business side over the wall, they also often have expectation that you as a development team is going to turn around, give them a precise dollar estimate and a plan, date, time plan to deliver.
Right.
So how do you deal with that expectation?
Yeah, that is very common. In this case, we were given the date, right? It was a year before they even met the team, before they met anyone. So without knowing all the variables, we were giving a date. But that doesn't scare me in an agile world. I mean, we can't just dismiss these estimates. I know the agile has a reputation for that sometimes. Is that, oh no, we can't do any estimates. We're agile, but we have to be able to do it. But we just take a different approach. We're not the only industry like this. We have to take the approach of, yeah, we'll put an estimate based on the data that we know now, but we're going to collect data, evidence, empirical evidence all along the way, and we're going to make decisions and changes based off of that. So when working with the business, the most effective thing I've found is if you involve them in these sprint reviews and you review where you are against the initial release schedule every single sprint, at least, probably more, then and change direction when they want us to, then they start to slowly take control and ownership of not just the product backlog, but of the release itself. I want my business sponsor to be the place to go. If you want to know how well this project's doing, go to the product owner. They need to know this stuff. They need to own the release schedule. And as you build stuff of value early, then they start to ease up a little bit. People tend not to stress as much. These deadlines are mostly put in, people are usually just afraid that they're going to get nothing at the end, or what they get is just unusable. That's the big worry. But if you're properly agile, if you're doing Scrum correctly, you're delivering something of value that works, of high quality, every single sprint. That kind of eases them up a little bit. Then they feel like they're more in control. So you can literally give them something they didn't ask for at the end, what they initially asked for. But if you start to switch along the lines of where they want to go and adapt with them, be flexible, then they take ownership of that. That's what we try to set up in a good agile environment. So, and the demo is just one part of that. You know, with sprint planning and all these different pieces, the more you involve them, then the more empirical your plan becomes, because these are forecasts that you put out. Just like the financial industry, they put a forecast for the year and what their stock price is going to be like, and what, how much the revenue they're going to get. And if after one quarter their numbers are off, what do? They reforecast. They have to. I mean, if they stick their head in the sand and say, no, we're going to follow it, then they'll be laughed at. So other industries do this all the time. We have to get used to it. Let's make a plan initially, great, but let's re-examine it based on the data that we have over and over again, and reforecast if we have to. But one thing we can practically guarantee is you'll have something working of quality, and it'll be valuable. Will it be everything from the document? Probably not. Does that help?
Absolutely.
All right, so let's move on to scenario 3. So no support. Now you've got the business on board. You got programmers, testers, business analyst, manager, and a business sponsor. You get a great relationship with the business. You work with them on a daily basis. However, your organization is formed or has a formal process, which includes budgeting, status reports. They ask for red, green, yellow every single week, and it is eating up like 20-30% of people's times, managers' times. They have these quality gates that take days and require 19 or plus signatures. Time tracking that they've got mixed into there. They want to account for actual hours for every little thing that you do. Their hiring practices are all over the place. You have new people being sent onto your team all the time that aren't down with the way you guys are doing it. And so there's a lot of extra things, a lot of overhead that's happening here. And changing these things can affect bonuses. People's bonuses are based on whether they meet the deadlines and budgets and all that. So a lot of things that can affect your agility here based on this. But you're a whole team. It's just that The other layers just are not supportive of that. So what do you do? So the first question is there an existing process? Many organizations you go into, they have their own SDLC, usually based on some waterfall thing, or sometimes RUP, Rational Unified Process. Oftentimes, though, it's a misunderstanding of RUP. And then, but if there is no existing process, then now the next question is, well, what is stopping us? Is it the compliance restrictions? Is it Sarbanes-Oxley? Is it security? Is it all these other things, all these other groups that are inserting themselves in the process all the way through? Before you go to production, you have to check off these boxes and get these signatures and all that. Because if that's not a case, then there's no worries. And again, sort of half joking here, but a lot of places we go into, they don't have any of this. So when you bring them Scrum or anything like that, that's more process than they've ever been used to. So you can basically fly through it without any issues. Any problems that arise are usually better than what they're doing today. And you get around a lot of pushback by saying, well, how do we do things today? Or how do you do things today or yesterday? Was it better? And so anyway, so it's hard to go against something as small as like user stories when they haven't been doing anything previous to that. If there are compliance restrictions, then this is another big thing. You can give them leverage, empower the stakeholders there, because they are stakeholders. Put those these are non-functional requirements, Sarbanes-Oxley compliance, security, all these other things that are stopping us. By not doing them, we're not going to get it into production. We're not going to be able to release. So put them on the product backlog. We don't do this enough. Let's involve them in the process, because ultimately this isn't an IT issue that they have to do this. This is a business issue. Your product owner should be extremely concerned and worried about when they get these things done. So they need to prioritize them along with everything else in the backlog. So if I have to do X, Y, Z before I can, as part of compliance, before I can ever release, then that, yes, is a business thing. So put them in the backlog, hopefully ordered in the backlog before your first release, and get them done and give them credence and bring them in as stakeholders. When you have sprint planning and you have these compliance officers there, invite them in to find out what their true needs are, and make them part of the process and not ignore them like so many of us tend to do. Then do a sprint. When you do a sprint and just make it work. If there is an existing process, ask if it maps to Agile. Like things like Rational Unified Process do tend to map to Agile, and sometimes it's just a matter of pointing that out to your process police. It is meant to be iterative. You can make those sprints. RUP uses 2 to 6 week iterations. You can go call them sprints, make them 2 weeks. You can show how you can be very much Agile. You can put Scrum and make it work within the RUP process. Show that not everything in RUP is mandatory. Not every template is mandatory. Because if it maps to Agile, then there are no worries. Then from there, make it a part of it. Although a caution here is if this is a process that all the teams are used to ignoring, then I tend to stay away from the SDLC that they have. So if you go into an organization and they've been doing this and they have this very rigid SDLC process but nobody follows it, then if you add to that, then they're just going to see your Agile adoption and your Agile process is just yet another thing that they can ignore safely without getting any repercussions. Many organizations, MO groups within organizations, are in that situation where they have these things but nobody follows them. Everybody ignores them, and they're mad that nobody's following them. If in a way, you kind of don't want to be associated with that. Show this, make this something new, make this something different, because it has to feel different. Also, don't let them name it the exact same. You know, oh, you have a requirements document. Well, can we just call the backlog a requirements document now? That doesn't feel very different. You know, some of the success of Scrum has been because it makes things sound different. We do a Scrum, we do daily Scrums, we have a backlog, we have a product owner and a Scrum master. These things feel very different than project managers and requirements lists and iterations. And so that's a key thing because it feels new, it feels different, and that's a big part of adoption. You do a sprint. If it doesn't map to Agile now, this is the key. If what you're doing does not map to Agile, then notify the stakeholder. This shouldn't be an excuse to just stop and say, well, it's not going to work here. Notify stakeholders, because you can still be, you can still do Scrum. You can still be working within sprints and having a backlog, but there's going to be a lot of waste. One organization I worked with said that you need to do 1 day, 2 day quality gate at the beginning of a plan to release and before you release. But we were doing 2-week sprints, and the goal was to release every single sprint. So 10 days worth of work, and they wanted to take 2 of those days just to go through their process, their quality gates. They were used to 6-month release cycles, so it's a little bit more manageable there. So at first, we didn't have much of a choice. We just did it. But we notified the stakeholders about how much waste was happening because of this, and it just made it obvious. It shouldn't stop us, but it'll slow us down quite a bit. We'll build a velocity, and then every single sprint, we're going to do a retrospective and a demo with both the PMO and management as well, not just with the stakeholders. And talk to them about this and say, look, this is our velocity. If we want to move faster, here are some ideas we have. If we can reduce the amount of time and the amount of signatures, or make it quicker for communication between these groups, here's where we can save money. But it doesn't stop us. You can keep moving. That's what I love about Scrum, is it's a crank you can just keep turning and always moving forward, always moving forward. And you can have horrible things happen, but there's always a goal that you're trying to meet. And even though all these other things are happening, you can still make it happen and not just throw the baby out with the bathwater. So notify them over and over again. Do the demo, do the retrospectives, ask, can we improve these things? Make the PMO people heroes as well. Rather than them seem to be getting in the way, or the Sarbanes-Oxley people, show them how they can make their job easier as well, and how they can make, because the world is moving more in an agile direction. Here's things you can do now in the future for all these other teams. Work with them on it and help them. So this is kind of the loop that you would go through over and over again by trying to make that work. Another thing worth mentioning here is I'm going to go back to one of the slides here. So down here in the bottom corner, you see that the teams in this case are across silos. If you don't have organizational support, this middle management layer, the green layer where it says PMO, Director Architecture, QA Manager, the expectations certainly have to be set there about how they bring their people into the teams. To be agile, your team really needs to have dedicated, focused team members. That's a hard thing to have done in an organization. So by really setting expectations at that level, where you're providing us with people for the entirety of a project. You can still meet with them every week. You can do what you need to. Communities of practice around the QA group, and your reviews can still be done more along the lines of the teams. But you're providing people for an entirety of a project, and not divvying them out as projects have needs, because we need that focused teams. So that also is a key thing to this one. Okay, and then finally we've got the from the top one. This is you are a VP, new VP, brought in to manage a growing e-com division in a large organization. You've seen agile practices work well at your previous company, but you're new to this one. People don't even really know you yet, but you're coming in. But from what you see, there's little evidence of agile in the organization. You're looking at the teams. Some are trying to do it, but not quite there. What little process that is visible seems to be rooted in more the compliance side of things. So what do you do when you have this? So you're empowered. You're in a position where you could probably make some things happen. But how do you do it properly without rocking the boat too much? So first, figure out, are they on board? Are there groups here that are passionate about this, that want to do it? If you're not sure, you can do agile assessments. There are all kinds of them out there. The Nokia test, or we do them for organizations all the time. These quick little assessments. We'll go in, we'll talk to different teams, we'll figure it out, we'll see where they are with their change tolerances and what practices exist currently that you could leverage. If they are, then the next thing is to address risk. If you feel that this is good and they're willing to do it, and you believe in Agile, you believe in the people there, then the best thing to do is just go ahead and make it work. So if you've addressed that, you thought that there is not that much risk, then the idea of doing these little dipping your toes in the water, that type of thing, that just delay agility, just go ahead and make the changes necessary. If your teams are more technical oriented, then go ahead and restructure them. If you got people reporting the wrong way within the organizations, like we talked about last time, and their teams aren't focused or dedicated on projects, then these are some quick things that you can make happen right away. Teams are focused on one project at a time, one product at a time. They're vertical slices. They're feature teams, not technical teams. So that way we can give them everything they need to push something out the door from a release perspective. There are certain things you can just make happen. Restructure the teams to be more agile. If there is risk, this is the idea of a pilot team. Now, I find that pilots usually make things really slow because you take sort of the best people and you get a success and everything seems great, but it's not sticky. It doesn't stick. So, but if there is risk, this is something you might want to consider. You don't know how people are going to react to it. Politically, it's dangerous. Technically, it might be dangerous. So why don't we just take a team and see if it'll work there. If this team, you don't want to do some rinky-dink little project of 2 or 3 people. That you want some visibility. You want to see something that has some high profile, but you want to set yourself up for success as well. So something in the middle. You should then be, if you're at this position, remember we talked about coaching and training, certainly consider this as well. Can we get them into training? Can we level set everybody now, regardless of which way we go? This is key. Too often we've been thrown, kind of parachuted into large organizations to do Agile adoption, but we can't get any time with them. They're in maybe a firefighting mode, and we're consultants walking up trying to ask for an hour of their time. We feel like the 2 Bobs from Office Space, if you've ever seen that movie, where we're trying to interview people and talk to people, and they have no trust in us. They don't know us, and I don't blame them for not wanting to talk to us. Training does a lot to level set. It level sets, it makes sure we're all on the same page, it gives everybody the same terminology, and it gives them confidence in people as well that this is something that could work there and that they're willing to invest in you. So do the whole team Agile training in that case. One whole team. Don't just train the business people and then the development people. Train everybody, whole team, one whole team together, 2 whole teams together. What we found is you train just technical people, then you'll get a lot of comments like, well, this is all great, we love this stuff, but there's no way the business would give us a product owner or one person, a sponsor. And then we train the business people, and they go, oh, we love this stuff, this is great, but there's no way the technical people would produce something every iteration that has no bugs. So by putting them in one class, one room together, and getting them all working together, then what happens is they build the process in the training. They get an idea. We introduce the framework, but we don't have all the answers. But by talking through it, they can pound away at the framework, and by the end of the class, they have an idea of how it might work within their organization. They know their organization better than the trainer does or the coach does. So we try to make it happen that way. Then we do a sprint. Even if you can't train, do a sprint. It's going to be more slow. It's going to be more painful because of it, based on what I just talked about. But do a sprint anyway. See how it works out. And then demo with the organization, because this is all about Agile adoption, whether it's the pilot or a whole thing. Let's see how this adoption is going. Do a list of things, and from an organization standpoint, you're going to want a group of people that can actually make decisions or have as an objective Agile adoption, kind of a coalition of people that are looking to do this. And then what they're supposed to do is address risk again. If they still feel that there's risk, this isn't necessarily the way to go, then do another pilot team or continue with the pilot team for some more sprints. If not, this is where we can make the big sweeping changes a little bit more once we address some of that risk through the pilots. Now, having said that, a couple of things to keep track, certainly for this last one. There is a great book called Leading Change by John Cotter. He's got a lot of books like this. One's called, I think the next one after this is Our Icebergs Are Melting. But he talks about true change, not just in the software industry, but change within organizations is very, very difficult. We won't go through the details of all of these, but definitely worth a read, and this has been a big influence on how we do things at Improving, but also Scrum.org is going down this space a lot with something that they call the continuous improvement framework. So it's going to be at the organizational level. The first thing you need to do is establish urgency. You might have data, you might have whatever it is. Why are we doing this? If our profits are 10% above last year, then why do we need to do anything here? But if we show them that, hey, well, the rest of the industry is 20%, so we're falling behind. We need to establish urgency. Why do we want to do this? So without urgency, you have complacency, where change is just simply not going to get done if they don't feel it. Once that's done, you have to create a guiding coalition, a team of people that are empowered within the organization to actually make things work. In that last scenario, it can't just be that VP by himself making all these things change. You need critical mass. You need decision makers. So the next thing you would do is get a group of people to lead this within all parts of it. People from the sales or marketing or business side. People from the hiring side is very key. All these things, all these people that you can do and build a backlog of things you can actually create. That's your guiding coalition. They together can build a change vision. So a vision for the actual adoption themselves. Why are we doing this? What are we hoping to achieve? Communicate that to everybody there and empower them for broad-based action. You're going to go through your organization, talk to the different teams, and see what they can actually do about this, what we're trying to achieve, and how they can play a role in doing this. Look for short-term wins. This is key. We want to be able to show that there's value here. Look for the low-hanging fruit. Push something out there quickly so that we can see that this is worth pursuing. And then never let up. I know from our standpoint, when things seem to be going great, you're with a team that has been just knocking out of the park for 3 months. You're like, okay, this is great. I guess you don't need me anymore, and then you leave. It doesn't take much for them to snap back. A change in management, a team gets broken up, whatever it is, before they go back to the way things were. So never letting up is key. Building something that's just sustainable. Going back, empowering the people to actually do it, not just through consultants. The people have to do it. You have to incorporate change into the culture itself along the way. So very highly recommended reading this John Cotter book on leading real change. Leading versus managing is another key term, but you'll find that out in the book if you want more. We've developed in improving this thing called the Agile Mentoring Program. I won't go through the details of it, but it kind of bases itself a lot on that. It's 6 months, and it's a slow handoff from a coach to the organization, where we're not gone too quickly. We come back and we do reviews and we do assessments and we talk about how we can keep the stickiness going on this. So we're there full-time for the early parts and then slowly kind of break, but towards the end we're there 25% of the time. And other things that, from an organization standpoint, which you can do here, and just in the interest of time, I'm going to blow through these, but investments that your organization is going to have to be prepared to make when doing Agile adoption. So as I bring these up, just judge your organization from perfect to worst on this sort of sliding scale here, because the closer they are to the right, then the easier your time you're going to have with your Agile adoption effort. So are they willing to build a single vision per project? Too often this isn't the case. Not everybody knows that vision and it's not communicated. Do you have dedicated project teams? Are they willing to say that these teams are 100% dedicated to these projects and not have that context switching where we lose so much time? Teams formed around functionality rather than technology. So we talk about vertical slices versus horizontal. If you have a team for the website and a team for a layer between the website, web services team, and then a business logic team and a warehousing team and a database team, how many different teams is a business sponsor going to have to deal with to get an initiative through? They're going to have to coordinate all these teams together and get them to integrate and push something out at the same time. It's almost an impossible task if they're organized technically. However, if you build them vertically, where all these teams, you have one of each within a team, and that team has pretty much everything they need to push an initiative through, makes it much easier from the business standpoint. Can your teams self-organize? Is there daily business involvement with project teams? And is your development team, are they capable? Do they have the tools necessary and the skills necessary to build something that's potentially shippable every iteration? Does this preclude you from doing Scrum, or do any of these preclude you from being Agile? No. But these are all goals you have to be moving towards. What types of changes do we have to do so that we can actually build something that's shippable? Technically, culturally, politically, what is it? And we should be addressing this every single time. These are your Agile adoption investments to get the returns that Agile promises. And I guess just quickly, I'll just pop by the final ones are these three different anti-patterns to keep an eye out for. One is cargo cults. This is something we see a lot of, and it's based on a story in South Pacific where the U.S. military took over an island and they built up these towers and stuff, and they dropped supplies that the natives got a hold of. They opened them up, and inside were Coca-Cola, M&Ms, all these cool things that they'd never seen before. Well, after the war, the military cleaned everything up. But then 30, 40 years later, researchers went back to the island, and what they found was that the islanders, the natives, had rebuilt everything. They built planes and towers all out of bamboo. They weren't operational. But they had created all this stuff. And the question is why? Why did they do this? And the reasoning was that they were hoping that more peanut M&Ms and Coca-Cola would fall out of the sky like it did back then. By reproducing what they saw, they thought that stuff would fall from the skies. So the religion had developed out of this based on from generations past from who were there originally. We see this in our world a lot. Just because Scrum has like all these different meetings and roles and stuff and the board and colorful cards and all that, just by doing it doesn't make it so. This is the cargo cult mentality. Just because you do daily scrums every 15 minutes and you do your sprint planning and keep it restricted to the time box and you do 4-week sprints and no more, doesn't make software magically fall from the sky. It's up to the team. They need to be able to do this work. The organization has to live, breathe agile. This is about being agile, not just doing it. And then also tipping the scales. Too often we go way off to one side or not to the other. This is the reputation that Agile had originally, was no more documentation, just start cowboy coding. Take these things on one at a time. Don't put the baby out with the bathwater. Don't find one thing as a reason to not do this stuff. Always look to just be a little bit better every day, every sprint. If you can just improve on one thing at a time, that's it. I've never been on a perfectly agile project, but we can slowly move towards that target as we go. And then finally, cookie cutter. Let's say you do a pilot project and it goes great, and it's huge success. Organization loves it. The worst thing you do is take exactly what they did and then push it on all the other teams in the organization. It's not cookie cutter. The success of Scrum is that it is a framework. These are things you can do, but within that you have lots of wiggle room. The team is a framework for teams to create their own process. You need to leave that freedom into whatever agile adoption strategies you're following. So give them the opportunities to change. You can show them things that these other teams did as success, but it has to be the team's decision not to take on and to change certain things outside of the boundaries of Scrum. And that's it. Yeah, so Kim, we have 3 minutes left for questions, but hopefully I got you guys got the gist of it, and be happy to answer questions.
Excellent. So, Don, instead of any presenters, if you can just page to the next slide, I'll do a quick intro to Synergip in 5 seconds, and then let's take some really good questions. So just stand by. We'll take a couple of really good questions. But here's a quick intro to Synergip in a nutshell. We are actually a software development partner for small mid-sized technology companies, and we essentially work as an extension of our clients' in-house team and help them deliver software following agile practices, which obviously reduces the risk and increases the value of software delivered, and do that along the way with reducing significantly the cost of software development because of our offshore development capability. So that's as much for the introduction. Let's take a couple of questions since we have another minute and a half or so. So one question